Let me tell you about the day billionaire Mark Thornton finally saw the woman he'd looked right through for years. It started with snow. And it ended with the hardest lesson of his life. The wind howled through Chicago's financial district, swirling snowflakes like forgotten secrets. Most people hurried inside, but on a lonely park bench, a woman sat motionless. Her blue uniform was dusted white, her skin pale as the frost creeping up her sleeves. Her name was Elena. For 3 years she had worked in Mark Thornton's penthouse, making his bed, brewing his coffee, fading into the background like furniture. Mark knew nothing about her. Not that she sent every paycheck to her sick father in Guatemala. Not that when rent doubled, she'd been sleeping in his laundry room. And certainly not that yesterday, when she'd arrived 5 minutes late, hands shaking from a night spent in the subway. He'd fired her without a single question. "You're done here," he'd said. And just like that, Elena walked into the cold with $17 to her name. Now, as dawn broke, Mark, who never walked to work, stomped through the park, furious his driver was late. Then he saw it, a shape on a bench. A familiar shade of blue. "Elena!" No response. He touched her shoulder, ice cold. "Elena! Wake up!" Her lips were blue. Her breath, barely there. "There's a woman, she's not moving, please hurry." As the ambulance sirens wailed, Mark did something he hadn't done in a decade. He prayed. The doctors called it severe hypothermia. But what Mark Thornton was about to learn, that wasn't the only thing freezing in this room. The ER lights buzzed overhead as Mark paced, his Italian loafers squeaking on sterile floors. Nurses shot him glances. What's a billionaire doing here? But Mark barely noticed. His phone rang non-stop. Board members, his assistant, his ex-wife, but for once he ignored them all. Then the doctor stepped out. "She's stable. But another hour outside and we'd be having a very different conversation." Mark's throat tightened. Let me show you what Mark never saw. Elena sending money orders to a tiny clinic in Guatemala. Her folding Mark's shirts at 2 a.m., wiping her eyes, the eviction notice on her apartment door, and her sneaking into the Thornton mansion's laundry room at night. For months, Elena had been homeless. And the man who signed her paychecks, he never even noticed. When Elena finally woke, she took one look at Mark, her fired boss sitting at her bedside, and turned to the wall. "Why are you here?" Her voice was cracked ice. Mark's hands clenched. "Because I should have been there sooner." A silence heavier than snow. Then Elena whispered the words that would haunt him. "You were there every day, Mr. Thornton. You just didn't see me." The next morning, Mark stood before his household staff, chefs, drivers, maids, their uniforms crisp, their eyes wary. These people knew him as the man who fired a gardener for trimming roses, too loud. But today his voice shook. "I owe you all an apology. Especially Elena." A gasp rippled through the room. "I thought success was about numbers. But it's about people. And I failed." There are moments that change everything. For Elena, it was waking up in that hospital bed. For Mark, it was realizing the woman he'd dismissed as just the maid would become his greatest teacher. The doctors wanted to keep Elena for observation, but Mark insisted on something radical. Not sending her to a shelter. Not even putting her up in a hotel. He turned his Manhattan penthouse's guest suite into her recovery room. "You'll stay here," he said, placing a set of keys in her hand. "Not as staff. As a guest." Elena's fingers trembled around the keys. "Why are you doing this?" Mark looked down at his Italian loafers, the same shoes that had stood in the snow beside her bench. "'Cause for 3 years you saw me every day. It's time I started seeing you." Those first weeks were awkward. Mark would enter the kitchen to find Elena already there, her hands instinctively reaching for the coffee maker before stopping herself. He'd catch her smoothing invisible wrinkles from the couch cushions. Old habits die hard. Then one evening everything changed. Mark came home to find Elena crying over a photograph. Not hiding in a closet or bathroom, sitting right at his marble kitchen island, tears falling onto a worn picture of a smiling man. "My father," she whispered when she noticed him. "The hospital in Guatemala called today. He didn't make it." Mark didn't offer money, didn't make empty promises. For the first time in his life, the billionaire simply sat beside the woman who'd cleaned his home and said, "Tell me about him." As Elena healed, something remarkable happened. Mark began noticing things. The way Carlos, his doorman, had been coughing all winter. How Maria in accounting always ate lunch alone, and that the janitor who cleaned his office had a son at Columbia. "You've started seeing people," Elena remarked one morning. Mark stirred his coffee. "Turns out the world looks different when you actually look at it." When the annual Thornton Foundation Gala arrived, Manhattan's elite expected the usual champagne, canapés, and a smug speech from the billionaire host. They weren't prepared for Mark taking the stage, with his former housekeeper beside him. "A month ago," Mark began, "I fired a woman for being 5 minutes late. What I didn't know was that she'd spent the night in a subway station because she had nowhere else to go." The ballroom went deathly quiet. "This is Elena Morales. For 3 years she made my bed, washed my dishes, and folded my shirts. And in all that time," his voice broke, "I never once asked if she had a bed of her own." Then Elena stepped forward. In perfect English no one knew she spoke. She told her story. Not as a victim, but as one of millions of invisible workers. When she finished, not a single dry eye in the house. The camera would show Elena at the head of the table in Mark's boardroom, now director of employee welfare, Mark waiting patiently as an elderly janitor finished mopping before passing through a hallway, and the two of them laughing over empanadas at a tiny Bronx cafe, a framed photo of Elena's father between them. But the real change: the bronze plaque on that park bench where Elena nearly died. It reads, "For the people we walk past every day, may we learn to see them. We live in a world that teaches us to chase success at all costs." But Mark and Elena's story reminds us, true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in moments of connection, in the courage to see, in the humility to change. So today I challenge you. Who's the invisible person in your life? The security guard who nods hello every morning. The cashier who rings up your coffee. Maybe today's the day you finally see them. If this story moved you, hit like and share it with someone who needs this reminder. And in the comments, tell us about someone the world overlooks. Let's make the invisible seen.